Our nation, our country. Our future is built by scientists, by engineers, by innovators, by men and women who see value in learning and in change. The Moses Kotane Institute specializes in nurturing future leaders. We have been successfully skilling learners from underprivileged backgrounds since 2009 with our specialized learning programs. Anyone can change the world. They just need a chance.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very exciting session. I am Lindsay King. I'm the editor for Achiever magazine, the publication attached to this event. We are running quite late, so I'm going to be very short so that our panel of experts can have all the time for themselves. I would like to start introducing our panel. From your left, we have Mr. Adrian Janse van Rensburg. We have next to him, we have Ms. Chantal de Villiers, and at the end we have Dr. Marietta Prinsloo. The two panelists on either sides of the panel are psychologists, and in the center we have a psychometrist. So we're talking today about the importance of the assessment of skills talent. I want to repeat it, the importance of the assessment of developing skills talent. The emphasis here for me is it's about developing talent and not just people. It's a huge question that we need to address. And what's interesting on this specific session is that we are having a very strong psychological focus on the next hour and a half that we're together. Before the panelists start, I'm asking each of them very briefly in 5 sentences to put all of you in the picture as to where they're coming from, very briefly what they do. Adrian, can we start with you?
Thank you, Lindsay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and let me start off by saying thank you for coming to this session to come and listen to us. It certainly is a different departure angle that we followed. I'm from ArcelorMittal and I manage resourcing, assessments, that's all people assessments, as well as the employee relations. Yes, it's a funny kind of portfolio. On the one hand you assess people, on the other you negotiate. But so far it works for us. Thank you.
Chantal?
Hi, I'm Chantal. I'm the psychometrist for ArcelorMittal. So basically it's my priority to assess all of our employees, internal and external potential employees throughout South Africa.
Dr. Prinsloo.
I'm Marietta Prinsloo from Magellan Consulting and Cognitive, the 2 companies. I'm a psychologist and I develop assessments and use them in the corporate environment across industries basically.
So without any further ado, I introduce to you Adrian.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, where to start? ArcelorMittal, those of you who attended the plenary session this morning heard that we're a global international company. We employ in a region of 260,000 employees globally, and we have a presence in 60 countries across the globe. Being manufacturing and mining orientated, you can imagine that the primary source of our talent comes from the engineering industries or from the engineering discipline, being metallurgical, mechanical, electrical, electrotechnical, chemical, etc. Now, having that focus on manufacturing and the heavy focus on engineering and the engineering discipline, it just follows that if you look at people development, and if you look at people in managerial positions or people that you promote into managerial positions, they would primarily come from the engineering discipline. And we all know that engineers not necessarily are the best managers of people, because that's why they studied engineering. Now, ArcelorMittal also, we believe that we grow our leaders from within. And we also develop our employees from within. I mentioned when I started off that we're a global company. So it immediately follows that we have succession planning that we do globally. If I translate that into common language that we all can understand, it implies that if I work in South Africa and I talk about the potential or the performance of a person, an engineer or any other person that works at the Van der Bijl Park plant, the individual in Kazakhstan or Romania must understand if I say a potential level of 4, that is what I mean. And if I say a potential or a performance level of a 3, they should understand what it means. They can translate it. So we're talking one yardstick across the globe. That brought us to a process of when we talked about succession planning, how do we go about to distinguish between employees and talented employees? Because obviously, not all employees have the potential to become a general manager or even a works manager of a specific plant. You need to look at the development of people, and specifically not only within positions that they currently occupy, but also across positions and across functions. And we started the process of identifying talents, people that we can use or people that we can develop for greater responsibility to be promoted into positions not only in South Africa but globally. Now, when we started our talent management process, those were the criteria that we used. We primarily looked at on-the-job performance, which obviously is subjective. If I have a very good relationship with an individual and they just do the bare minimum, but the plant is running, it is okay, objectives are met, my assessment of that individual can be very subjective because I want to promote. And performance criteria not necessarily gives an indication of an individual's ability to perform equally at the next higher level. Why? Because it deals with different complexity when it gets promoted to the next level. So obviously, you need to look at something else. What we also used was a balanced scorecard as part of a performance measurement process. So although we had specific KPIs and standards linked per position, the way that we went about to determine the potential was not scientifically done. So we would use a very good performer, and we would say the fact that this individual is performing very well gives us an idea or an indication that they will perform equally well at the next higher level, which is not necessarily so. We then used that information that was done during a performance discussion, and we verified it in a career committee, which consisted of a number of managers. And again there, subjectivity creeps in, because I might know someone that they're talking about, whereas the individual that we discussed during the next round of discussions, I never knew. I don't even know who they're talking about. So you sit with a very subjective evaluation of potential, or we sat with it. We then said, but we need to identify or get a definition of talents. And we looked strongly at the Corporate Leadership Council's definition of talent. And the corporate definition of the Corporate Leadership Council, their definition of talent says it is someone with the ability, the engagement, and the aspiration to rise to and succeed at the next level position, and is able to take on increased responsibilities in other sectors or functions, so cross-functional, in the organization and who has demonstrated a consistent history of successful performance. And only there do you see the performance. So 3 key issues: ability, engagement, and aspiration. And the 4th issue is continued good performance. Whereas prior to the process that we're discussing this afternoon, we used subjective measures which was only related to performance management. But what is potential? We talked about the aspiration, we talked about the engagement, and we talked about ability. What is aspiration then? Aspiration we find in having a challenging job. If my job is not challenging, would I aspire to something else, or would I stagnate in my current position? Prestige and recognition, advancement and influence, obviously financial rewards, and then lastly, in terms of aspiration, overall job enjoyment. Ability, what do we look for in ability? Personal characteristics, psychological attributes, part of personal characteristics, as well as learned skills. So no longer do we only focus on the individual's functional or technical ability. We also start looking at other attributes. Engagement, boldness to take decisions, as an example. An individual's emotional commitment, rational commitment, discretionary effort, and the intent to stay versus the intent to leave a company. And the balance of that, we say that gives us a sort of indication where we were dealing with talent. But I'm sure if you look at the next slide, you will see, or you will identify some of your colleagues or some of the people that you work with in some of these areas. The so-called engaged dreamers. High aspiration. They want to become the GM. They want to become the manager. High engagement. They're willing to work hard, but there's just no ability. No ability, but high aspiration and high engagement. All these so-called misaligned stars. High engagement, high ability, but low aspiration. Not willing to walk the extra mile. Not willing to do more than what is required. And lastly, the unengaged stars. High aspiration, a little bit lower engagement, and high ability. But the engagement is not there. And remember what we said in the previous slide. We need a balance of that. We need a balance of aspiration, ability, and engagement. And that is what we set out in our process when we started looking for talent. Why then did we go about to assess employees, to assess people, to determine talent? I think firstly, to diagnose the skill set and the potential of job occupants. That assessment was done not only on current incumbents to determine a skills gap for the development, because obviously you must develop them towards something, which we'll discuss a little later. But as well as the assessment of people that are identified as possible successors for the position or for the managerial position in question. Secondly, to determine the bench strength and the successor depth that we have in the company. Obviously, if you look at your managerial level and you look at the type of industry that we're in South Africa we only have 2 blast furnaces, one in Vanderbijl Park and one in Newcastle. And we must make sure that we develop and that we grow our leaders from within, as I said earlier. And the only way to do it is to go and identify people at a very young age and to make sure that you develop them against the criteria, not only of the manager of a blast furnace, if I may use that example, but also the leadership criteria that is required in the company. It's not just a blanket approach of developing for the sake of development. And the identification that we went through gave us an excellent idea of which positions do we have a limited bench strength and where must we now recruit externally, or as Terence Harrison said this morning, where should we now put more effort in terms of securing bursaries, people with potential, bring them in the company and groom them over a period of time to ensure that we have proper succession for our key positions. Also to refine our developmental initiative accordingly. I just earlier mentioned that you don't only develop the functional competencies, there's also the leadership abilities, as well as the personality traits, the values that you want the managers to live and the people to live in your company. And that gets developed. Align the developmental initiative with required competencies. We've got required competencies for each and every position. And also the values that is required in the company, as well as what we call our 5+3 generic leadership competencies. Those are competencies like strategic thinking, decision making, effective communication, stakeholder orientation, and there's 4 more of those. Those are the generic competencies that we have in ArcelorMittal globally. So again, my example of earlier this afternoon, when I mentioned the 5+3 competencies in South Africa, and I speak to someone in the Ukraine or in Romania, they exactly know what we're talking about. We're talking about the 5+3 generic leadership competencies of ArcelorMittal Global. Lastly, why did we assess? Also to compile groups with similar and complementary developmental needs. We went through a process 3-4 years ago where we put approximately 400 to 500 of our senior people through a proper assessment center. Now, those of you who knows assessment center, you've got a personality measurement component and you've got a number of simulation exercises. And that assessment instrument specifically measured the 5+3 competencies. And from that we could gather where is the real needs for development, and we could budget in terms of our developmental budget that towards that specific development and secure in South Africa providers of that specific training. E.g., strategic thinking was one of the things that we needed to develop. So it gives you the ability to compile your groups with a similar and complementary developmental needs and address that through proper training. Constructs that we assessed during this round of assessments was cognition, values and motives, behavioral tendencies, and leadership competencies. And all of these are required at a different level in the different managerial positions that we assessed for. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Our assessment goals. We had a number of assessment goals prior to starting. We said, why do we want to assess? To limit the business risk by ensuring leadership competence. That's long term. ArcelorMittal has 3 brand values: quality, leadership, sustainability. And if you just keep that in mind, you will see that reflected in the assessment goals as well. Did we have success with that? 100%. To determine job complexity and optimize people-job fit. And when Marietta later on talk about the instruments that you use, you will see that, and yes, 100% success there, because what we did there is we would firstly evaluate the position with an instrument to determine the complexity level of that specific position, and then assess the current incumbent in order to see the fit between the complexity level of the position and the occupant's current level of functioning, and also to do the same with the successors for that position. To gain a greater understanding of leadership potential, to provide an opportunity to accelerate personal development and effectiveness, because now an individual had a specific personal development plan based on scientific assessment material related back to job competencies or job requirements, and specific development could take place. To contribute to the management of succession planning, promotions, recruitment, bench strength, we talked about that earlier, and to enhance team effectiveness and also diversity management. I need not talk about this. You all are training people, so you know the whole issue of knowledge, skills, and attitude. How did we use that? What did we plug in? We said with the AMSA leadership framework, we need to assess for those issues. Global leadership competencies, that is the 5+3 competencies. Our leadership values. We've got a number of leadership values that our leaders must aspire to. Safety, one can argue, is safety a value, but it's not negotiable for us. That's one of the values. Commitment, customer focus, and caring. Those are the values that we need to teach our leaders to drive within the company and to live within the company, to project through their management styles. Psychological attributes that we measured. We looked at capability and cognition, we looked at motivation, and we looked at behavior. For capability and cognition, we used structured interviews, we used IQ and potential tests, and we used assessment centers. For motivation, we used the values instrument, the VO, the motivational profile, the MP, EQ, emotional intelligence, and an interest questionnaire. And for behavior, we looked at personality, management skills, and leadership orientation. A number of assessment tools that we used, and after this slide, Marietta, I'm going to hand over to you. You're the fundi on these instruments. On the job and on the individual level, we used the CCM, which evaluates the job profile in terms of stratified systems theory of Elliot Jark. The CPP, which evaluates the individual against the job requirements. For the leadership and managerial competencies, assessment centers, self-assessment as well as performance evaluation, and also the MBTI and Belbin. For leadership values, motivation and EQ, we used the VO, the MP, and the EQI. And then ability, aspiration, and engagement, we evaluated the performance of an individual in task performance with a balanced scorecard. We had a career expectations discussion, and an engagement questionnaire is currently in development. Rita, thank you for discussion of the instruments.
Okay. Can you hear me? I was involved, myself and my company were involved with the assessment of about 400 executives in ArcelorMittal across the world. And we wanted to look at how we can provide an integrated approach to leadership, to succession, all those kinds of things. And we used this battery that Adrian has just explained to you. Now, where does one start with a big assessment project like that? Very often it is a good thing to start with cognition, because cognition is the best predictor of behavior, especially in complex work environments. And we use the stratified systems model, the frame of reference, as you can see here, to link people to jobs and to categorize various positions. Because as you know, various companies across the world have got very different focuses, different strategies, everything. They're in different cultural environments, etc. So we needed a basic model according to which we can integrate the whole lot. And this is the stratified systems model. It basically looks at work in terms of operational and strategic components. So those are your operational components, those are your strategic components. And then on the operational side is about value realization. So operational jobs are quite structured. They focus on the practical, pragmatic type things. Very often people work with detailed, technical, specialist type information. They get feedback in the short term, more so than in the long term, and they're pretty sure about what they have to do. They've got clear instructions as to what they should do. So the operational side of work is about value realization with those characteristics. On the strategic side, however, things look a bit different. Very often people work in unfamiliar domains. They are confronted with unfamiliarity. They are confronted with chaos. They often have to focus on ideas and formulate new ideas. They work with dynamic, interactive type components with long-term implications. And they work in a very uncertain world. So those are the characteristics of strategic work. And the job of strategic thinkers is to provide direction in the organization. Now, we've subdivided, or the stratified system model has subdivided this work in terms of 5 levels. And I'm quickly going to run through those levels. They range from pure operational to pure strategic. Pure operational work is very hands-on. It is, for example, if you're an operator or a clerk or someone who delivers services, or you are the teller behind the bank counter or whatever. You know exactly what you have to do. You only have to evaluate the quality of your work. If you have a problem, you can go to the supervisor who can help you resolve that problem. So it's a very short-term trial and error type approach where you apply your instructions directly. At the next level, the diagnostic level, the nature of work changes fundamentally. Here, people are often confronted with problems. For example, the system doesn't work, or what can I do here, or whatever. And they have to accumulate data, and they have to make a diagnosis about that. They also have a fairly short time frame, and they also have got good technical knowledge base or theoretical basis on which they can base their decisions and their exploration of a problem. This is the technical specialist type environments where people like teachers and salespeople and technical people and maybe young engineers start off here, maybe financial people start off here, where they operate. The language of each of these levels differ as well, and here the language focus is on objects, methods, and outcomes. So they have to solve problems and make sure that these problems do not reoccur. Very often they first line management, and they have to assist the operational level in the organization. The next level, again, is qualitatively very different, the tactical strategies. Here people don't necessarily work with linear causality like in the previous level. Here people ask either or at the diagnostic level, but at the tactical strategy level, they work with systems, and they have to look at how various system components interact and how they impact on one another. For example, if you are the manager of a business unit, a functional unit in the organization, or if you are a professional like a medical doctor, you work with a person, but that body is actually a system. And if someone has bad eyesight, it could be a sugar problem. It may not even be a directly eye-related problem. So in the work environment, these guys very often run functional units. They have to do budgeting, planning, resource allocation, and that kind of thing. And they have to be responsible for the viability of the division or of the functional unit of the organization. The kind of information they work with is still fairly tangible. So, you can touch and feel and count it still. At the next level, however, things become very intangible, very interactive and dynamic, and that is the level 4 parallel processing type environment. These people also work with systems, but it's not tangible systems. There's a lot of flow and circularity and feedback and that kind of thing. Their main job is to integrate the value chain, integrate external and internal factors in the organization. They have to integrate the broad strategy of the organization with the tactical strategy or the operational strategy. So that integration is the main cognitive requirement for this level of work. They have to look after the viability of the organization as a whole, whereas the previous level, the tactical level, look after the viability of the functional unit. The parallel processing orientation looks after the whole organization. And in their language, they focus on concepts such as culture, asset, labor, talent pool, those kinds of things. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're an HR person and you deal with these kinds of contexts that your job is a level 4 job, because your job only becomes that if you are the decision maker and if you have to look at the 3 to 5 year time frame for these various components. At the highest level, we find the pure strategic level. Now, this involves a macroeconomic focus where you have to look at various industries. You have to look at industry offerings, try to integrate those industry offerings to ensure the viability of your industry. So you may be in banking and you may want to promote your particular bank, but you have to make sure that banking has a future. So these people often look very widely. They also look at social and environmental impacts. For example, in mining, there are massive social and environmental impacts that have to be dealt with at this level 5 of peer strategy. These guys also identify the strategic intent of the organization. So all our assessments were linked to the stratified systems model, primarily the cognitive stuff, because cognition is a prerequisite for performance. It is not a guarantee. So if you just choose all the brightest guys, it's no guarantee that your organization will run. As Adrian has indicated previously, there are many other components as well. Okay, in the case of ArcelorMittal, we analyzed the various jobs using the CCM, the contextualized competency mapping tool, and we identified the levels of work requirements of those various positions. Now, the various levels that were identified that have characteristics or requirements, competency requirements that can be differentiated are your first line managers, followed by your middle managers, senior managers, top managers, and executives. So those are the levels. We also loosely linked it to the CPP levels of work so that we could identify what level a particular individual has potential for. Now, you'll see that it is relatively loosely. It's not a linear mapping that we've done, because there are other factors that also come into the picture. So there you have your various levels of work. For your first liners, level 1 and 2, for middle managers 2 and 3, for senior managers 3 and 4, top managers 4 and 5, and executives 4 or 5. Level 4 cognition, as measured by the CPP, the cognitive process profile, is very, very complex. And it looks at your skills to integrate, to logically reason about things, and your judgment in vague environments. So those are very stringent requirements in terms of cognition. But these levels are also linked to more holistic competency requirements. Let me tell you just something about the CPP quickly. The CPP is a fairly unusual cognitive measurement. It's not like an IQ test. IQ tests are notorious for only looking at highly structured content. They contaminate speed and power factors and many other things, and they rely quite a bit on your scholastic background, etc. The CPP is not like that. It is a simulation exercise where you solve certain problems. We define cognition in terms of how you make meaning of your world. How do you conceptualize your world and make meaning of it? And with the CPP, we look at how the person makes meaning of unfamiliar and new information. Now, while the person is playing this game or doing the simulation exercise, the CPP monitors him and checks his responses on thousands of measuring points. Those are then interactively interpreted by an expert system, and the results are given in terms of the person's preferences or his cognitive styles. For example, I may be intuitive and you may be logical or whatever. Those may be our preferences. It also looks at learning potential, because not all individuals have had the opportunity to develop themselves cognitively. So we want to have an indication of what is this person's learning potential still. Then we also look at the work environment in terms of the stratified systems theory that I've just explained to you. And we look at the person's strengths and development areas. For example, a person who is extremely analytical but not very integrative, or someone who is maybe very verbal and verbose even, but they don't have clarity of thought, so they confuse others, etc. So we look at those strengths and development areas. And we see capability as how you apply your judgment in unfamiliar environments, because that is when cognition comes to its right. In familiar environments, you can still rely on your knowledge and your previous skills and things like that. One of the aspects that the CPP looks at is your style, and different individuals have different styles by which they think. Unfortunately, IQ tests don't measure this. All IQ tests require an analytical, logical, cognitive style, and not all individuals have that specific preference or approach. So here we look at all kinds of things like people that are structured or holistic or intuitive. There's 15 different ones that we look at. Now, all of these give us very important information as to the kind of environment the person is best suited to. We also look at the level of work. Now, those levels of work that I mentioned to you just now, the peer operational to the peer strategic, all of them have got certain quantitative requirements, but they are also qualitatively different. So, you may have a gifted IQ, which, by the way, only measures diagnostic accumulation thinking. So you may have a gifted IQ, but you prefer technical specialist work. Then you will come out as a diagnostic person with a diagnostic orientation. In order to progress to the higher levels, you would have to be able to use your judgment in unfamiliar environments, have the confidence to use it, be able to conceptualize things that are very fragmented in a coherent kind of way, etc. So here we've got a little bar graph where we indicate how the person best apply themselves. The red line there is the required line in terms of qualitative and quantitative requirements, and we look at where the person's current and potential graphs cut the required graph, and that gives us an indication of where this person is best suited to. We also look at the person's styles. This particular person was very balanced in that they could use the typical left-right brain processes that people talk about. They were also very explorative, reflective, and logical, etc. They were not impulsive or random or anything like that. So this would appear, these are some of the indicators that would appear on a person's report, but the CPP report is a 20-page narrative that explains the person's development areas and a best work environment, etc. Okay, so that was the cognition. Cognition is very important to predict work performance, and it's a prerequisite for performance in complex environments. But there are other factors that are as important, such as your motivation and your values. And we use the word values and worldview, and we assess it in terms of the spiral dynamics model, for those of you who are familiar with that model. It looks at how you see the world. It's your frame of reference. And it determines how you're going to use your cognition and your personality. So this construct is actually much broader than cognition and personality and motivation and all the other constructs that are measured in psychometrics. So with values, we look at your worldview, your organizing frameworks, your perceptual systems, and of course those impact on just about everything. It impacts on how you feel about yourself, how you conduct your interpersonal relationships, how you perform in your work environment, and basically all your behavior are colored by these. I'm quickly going to explain this little model to you. It actually depicts levels of consciousness as being levels of awareness. How big is your world? And I'm quickly going to run through the various colors. They've just allocated colors to the various systems or value orientations so that they are more easily identifiable and understandable. But I'm quickly going to run through these, because in your organization there are probably purple, blue, red people, etc., and they all need to work together and they all need to do specific things. Let's quickly start with the purple. The purple mindset is about belonging. It's a family and a team mindset. You see the world in terms of us and them, and you're a little bit suspicious of them and their motives. You see it in trade unionists, you see it in dogmatic religious groups, you see it in people that are very strongly family oriented. These people don't enjoy taking personal responsibility. They do things as groups, and they want the protection of the group. So they want emotional security and they want to belong. Some individuals break out of this orientation and they adopt the red frame of mind, the red value orientation. And red is about discovering that you can make your own decisions in the world. You can control your world. You can build your own empire. These people are very energetic. They are sought for in the work environment because they are the hard workers. They get things done. In businesses where there are low margins, they make it work. So they are very highly sought after. But like with all these various colors, there's also a negative side to red, and that is that they want recognition, that they feel easily insulted, that they can be a bit impulsive at times, they can even be a bit dominant at times. So, and egocentric as well. So that is your red orientation. As one realizes that you're in a world where there are other people as well, the blue may emerge. You will see that on this side, it's all about me. I. On that side, it's all about the group. We. And the consciousness theorists say that as we progress and grow in terms of our consciousness, we first look at ourselves, then our group. Then at ourselves, then our group. So that is the natural progression. It's not a linear thing. And this is a soft hierarchy. We move up and down this hierarchy. Say, for example, I'm green and I all of a sudden I'm hijacked or whatever, I'll go and buy a gun. And that is maybe a red type of behavior that may be manifested. Just to illustrate that. Let's quickly look at the blue. The blue is about conforming. They are the guys that are mature. They create mature environments. They seek depth. They seek truth. They want things to have quality. These are the guys that will structure things and be very reliable in their approach. The negative is that they can be rigid and they can be very difficult to convince of new ideas because they would rather support the status quo. The next value orientation is orange. One moves from blue to orange, but not before you've either had a major problem in your life, faced a major challenge, heartache, loss, or you've had a wonderful opportunity. The purple, red, and blue are driven by fear, psychological fear. Purple fears insecurity, red fears losing face and shame, and blue fears feeling guilty. Then people transcend that fear that drives their behavior, and they move into the orange, which is a much more strategic achievement orientation. The world becomes your oyster. You think of various ideas. You become very resilient. That's the orange. A stereotypical orange would be your a venture capitalist or something like that. You all of a sudden focus on the world of people. It is followed by the green, which is a compassionate orientation to others. And green is often shown in people wanting relationship. They're participative managers. They want to develop others, etc. That's the green. Green is also very theoretical. And their weak point is that they become relativistic. When they have to make decisions, they don't want to hurt anybody and they want to take all the various theories into consideration, etc. Then, if you break through that emotional people focus, you land up, in terms of consciousness, in an integrated zone, and the yellow is the integrated, and very few people show that yellow orientation. Yellow is about wanting to learn, wanting to focus on understanding the dynamics, identifying where the leverage points are. These people move on, they don't really commit, and they are often criticized for various aspects, like red would criticize them for being lazy and blue would criticize them for being not committed or whatever. But yellow is very strongly into learning and understanding, and they often come with a solution which is simplistic. So they give you the simple after having thought through it in a complicated manner. Turquoise is the spiritual, existential, philosophical orientation, and I see people are running away, so I'm going to move on quicker. This is just a team that we've assessed in ArcelorMittal. We've assessed those 400 people, those executives all over the world, and then we took the various businesses to see what value orientation predominated. And in this particular team, it was strongly orange, very commercially oriented opportunities. What they rejected was the spiritual side, the purple and turquoise, and the red. I'm not going to rehash that. We also look at motivation, and motivation, we use a tool called the motivational profile that provides you with a whole lot of metaphors or archetypes or roles which you select. You say, in my life, I am a rebel, a student, a savior, a pioneer, or whatever. I'm not a this or a that. Then you play certain games with these roles that you select, and based on that, we can see what motivates you, what your life script is, what your shadow side is, what don't you know about yourself, what your defense mechanisms are. So this is a very deep tool. It is not a superficial kind of thing that it's based on Jungian psychology, and it can be used for coaching purposes. It also links to the Enneagram. It gives your head, heart, and feet, for example. The head is how you see the world. The heart is how much energy you put in. The feet is whether you get mileage or not in your life, work, and relationships separately. Okay, for the ArcelorMittal assessments, the holistic assessments, we also use the Myers-Briggs that looks at personality, and I'm sure you are all very familiar with the Myers-Briggs. It looks at where you get your energy from, what kind of information you want to work with, how you make decisions, and how you pursue your goals. And I'm not going to go into that. And then we used the Belbin to look at team roles. And it was very interesting to look at the team roles that these top executives seem to take. And Belbin himself worked with teams, and he found that a good, well-functioning team should have people that play all the various team roles. From the plant, who is the ideas person, to the implementer, to the shaper who cracks the whip, to the coordinator who manages everything, etc. So this we also did with that team. ArcelorMittal South Africa also uses the EQI, the Emotional Intelligence Quotient, and they look at interpersonal, intrapersonal, stress management, adaptability, and your general mood. So it's an interesting add-on to the whole assessment process. Okay, we then, after having assessed a person on all these various tools, we have a 2-hour feedback with a person, and then we integrate it into a summary report that provides details on the person's competencies, which are the derailers in his case, what are the strengths and development areas, the role fit, because there would be many different roles and we would have to fit his profile to a particular role profile, and then indicate potential, further potential. Okay.
Marietta and Adriaan, thank you very much for sharing your stories, your tools, and your insights. As I said initially, we are running late, so I'm going to open the floor for questions, 5 minutes only. So, any questions?
Okay, afternoon. I just wanted to understand, because obviously that's quite a large battery of assessments. Would that be at all levels of the organization, or would that just be your executives? Yeah, it looks very in-depth, interesting. But yeah, that's the question I have.
What we do is with all managerial levels, excluding the first line manager, which typically is your in the old context, foreman, superintendent level, we would use that. Our rationale for that is we assess potential for 2 levels higher because of building bench strength. Obviously, also for all external recruitments in managerial positions, we take them through the same battery.
Thank you, Adrian. Next question. So, David Capel.
This is quite an expensive exercise. How often do you repeat this kind of exercise?
We don't really repeat. We do the assessment, and we only started about 2 years ago. Marietta started a little while earlier with the international assessments. But the CPP is an exercise that you cannot repeat. Once you've done it, the information remains. Values, obviously, it's not an expensive tool, and the motivational profile also not. So we were considering doing that every 18 months to 24 months. But as we go through the process, obviously, also continuously we do that as we identify new successes. But it's not a situation where we're on a program where we redo everybody every 24 or 18 months.
Thank you, Adrian. And I'm taking the final question now. Right at the back.
How accurate is it? How do you assess accuracy? How would we know if you're succeeding in what you're doing?
Yes, that is quite an important question that you're asking there. With psychometric assessments, they have to be tested very thoroughly for validity and for reliability. So one has to do quite a lot of research on each of these tools. But even that wouldn't guarantee that a particular profile that we identify, if it matches a job, that person would be a good performer. Because people are very complex, their behavior is determined contextually, etc. What we can do very accurately is to identify who will not suit that position or who does not have the competency to work in that environment. So we try to identify those that show the best potential and then to pinpoint those that are not suited for a particular kind of role.
Apart from that, in practice as well, what we have now is at least we're doing some measurement. We are now starting to see the results coming through. I can use one example, and I will not mention the specific plant, where we needed a turnaround artist at the GM level. We've used the assessment. We put the person in, matched him to the job as we've explained here. And 18 months down the line, there's significant improvement. There are similar success stories lower down in the ranks. And if we compare, since we assessed and since we used the instruments versus the subjective way in which we calculated potential and only used performance, I venture to say a very, very high percentage of accuracy.
Chantal, Adrian and Marita, thank you very much for devoting your time and effort to be here today and putting together your presentations. To all of you, thank you so much for attending the session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit until tomorrow.
Since 2009, the Moses Kotane Institute has been providing leadership programs to communities. In our drive for people-centered economic development, we focus on leadership development in the areas of government as well as the more traditional structures. This leadership and indigenous knowledge program is specifically designed to help further enhance efficiency and sustainable service delivery. Become our partner and let's invest in our tomorrow together.